Corey, welcome.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Corey, what power does the FCC Chair Brendan Carr actually have?
Well, as part of the FCC, their licenses are in his hands. The FCC disallows cursing on air, and if all he was doing was enforcing rules like that and seeking to talk about them and protect them, there'd be no problem. But no government has the ability to shut down speech, and certainly not an ability to use the power of government to target and punish viewpoints that are seen as wrong or overly critical of the president.
I want to read for you a social media post on X by FCC Chair Brendan Carr back in 2022. And he wrote this: President Biden is right. Political satire is one of the oldest and most important forms of free speech. It challenges those in power while using humor to draw more people into the discussion. That is why people in influential positions have always targeted it for censorship. This is a guy who has lauded First Amendment rights his entire time at the FCC. What do you make of that social media post?
I would say, just pulling back a little bit from the law to think about the importance of free speech in a democracy, is what defines the opposite of the First Amendment in other countries are dictators who are able to shut down their critics. Now, are we approaching something like that? That's the factual inquiry. And there's no question that even if it's satire, even if it's mockery, it's protected. One of the problems, of course, with the current administration is that it preaches free speech. It claims to respect Charlie Kirk because of free speech. And yet, in threatening the opposition, as Trump has, and threatening to say that, for instance, as Pam Bondi did, that there's a theory of hate speech that they're going to use to shut down the Democratic Party or radical leftists. We don't have a hate speech doctrine of that kind in this country. Even the most extreme forms of speech are protected under the First Amendment. And so I'll give examples of things that are definitely not protected in countries like Germany that are protected here. One is Holocaust denial. The evil of the Holocaust is unquestionable, but under the First Amendment, you do have a right to deny it. And the same is true of the Ku Klux Klan rallying on a field. The court has been very clear that even cross-burning, as vile as it is protected. That's how radical our First Amendment is. And so it's not a hard case when a government is coming in and saying, not even in those extremes, but satire criticizing the president is going to be shut down. There's no world in which that's not protected.
So it's interesting. You brought up Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, and I want to read for you the quote that you were referring to when it came to hate speech, in which she said there is free speech and then there is hate speech. And there is no place, especially now, especially after what happened to Charlie, in our society. Tucker Carlson actually responded to that on his show on X.
You hope that Charlie Kirk's death won't be used by a group we now call bad actors to create a society that was the opposite of the one he worked to build. You hope that. You hope that a year from now, the turmoil we're seeing in the aftermath of his murder won't be leveraged to bring hate speech laws to this country.
This is Tucker Carlson, someone who is avowedly pro-MAGA, pro-Donald Trump. He is actually speaking out against some of what we've been hearing from the administration, specifically Attorney General Pam Bondi, in light of the horrific killing of Charlie Kirk.
There were many responses to her comments, which really, I'll be just blunt about it, show a complete ignorance of the First Amendment and the way the Constitution works. We don't have hate speech laws in this country or hate speech restrictions. We have a broad protection of all viewpoints, short of a couple of very narrow exceptions. The idea that there's some opinion of the radical left or the left or the right, for that matter, that's illegal in the United States is false. It was a cringe-inducing moment because she was showing a total lack of understanding of how our Constitution works. And this is supposed to be the chief law enforcement officer who doesn't know Constitutional Law 101.
You're the expert here. You think free speech is under attack?
There's no question. We're here again because the President of the United States, in threatening the so-called radical left, in Pam Bondi's comments, which we've talked about hate speech and wanting to make illegal, it looked like, some viewpoints, those are an attack on democracy itself, and they are an abandonment of the long-standing understanding of what this First Amendment is about. Now, we have had moments in history where we have abandoned democracy. So think of the Red Scare, and the court in many instances allowed for the prosecution of leftist viewpoints early in the 20th century. That's rightly seen as a shameful moment, or a shameful series of moments. But my fear is that we're headed exactly back there.
Corey Brettschneider, thank you.
My pleasure.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.